Letters from a Living Dead Man by Elsa Barker. Read for you by BlueFriend in beautiful BC. Part 5. Letter 25. Forbidden Knowledge. I have been doing many things of late. You could never imagine where I went the other day. To the great funeral of the Emperor of Japan. You could not go from Paris to Japan and return in so short a time, could you? But I did. An hour before starting, I did not even know that the Emperor of Japan was dead. The teacher sought me out and invited me to go with him. He said that something would occur there which I ought to see. His prophecy was verified. I saw a soul, a great soul, go out as a suicide. It was sad and terrible. But as I write this, the teacher comes and stands beside me. He advises me to say no more on that subject. One sees horrible things out here as well as beautiful things. I can only say, with regard to the suicide, that if men knew what awaits those who go out by their own hand, they would remain with the evil that they know. I am sorry I cannot tell you more about this, for it would interest you. The testimony of an eyewitness is always more convincing than the mere repetition of theories. The appearance of the teacher, with his advice, has put out of my mind for the moment the desire to write, but I will come again. And later. I have been able to do what you so much desired, to find the boy who came out accidentally by drowning. As you looked at his photograph, I saw it through your eyes, and carried away the memory of the face. I found him wandering about, quite bewildered. When I spoke to him of you, and said that you had asked me to help him, he seemed surprised. I was able to give him a little aid, though he has a friend here, an old man, who is nearer to him than I could ever be. He will gradually adjust himself to the new conditions. You had better not try to speak with him. He's on a different path, and is being looked after, for he has friends. The little help that I was able to give was in the nature of information. He needed diversion from a too pressing thought, and I suggested one or two ways of passing time which are both agreeable and instructive. You wonder at the expression passing time, but time exists out here. Wherever there is sequence, there is time. There may come a time when all things will exist simultaneously, past, present, and, shall we say, future? But so long as past, present, and future are more or less distinct, so long time is. It is nothing but the principle of sequence. Did you fancy it was anything else? Interiorly, that is, deep within the self, one may find a silent place where all things seem to exist in unison, but as soon as the soul, even there, attempts to examine things separately, then sequence begins. The union with the all is another matter, that is, or seems to be, timeless. But as soon as one attempts to unite with or to be conscious of things, time is manifest. Letter 25. A Shadowless World. I had been here some time before I noticed one of the most marked peculiarities of this world. One night, as I was passing slowly along, I saw a group of persons approaching me. It was very light where they were, because there were so many of them. Suddenly, as I saw this light, a thought came to my mind, a saying from one of the Hermetic books, quote, "Where the light is strongest, there are the shadows deepest," unquote. But on looking at these men and women, I saw that they cast no shadows. I hailed the nearest man. You must remember that this was soon after I came out, and when I was still more ignorant than I am now, I called his attention to this peculiar phenomena of a shadowless yet brilliantly lighted world. He smiled at my surprise, and he said, "You have not been here long, have you?" "No," I said. "Then you're not aware that we light our own place? The substance of which our bodies are composed is radiant. How could our forms cast shadows when light radiates from them in all directions?" "And in the sunlight?" I asked. "Oh," he answered, "you know that in the sunlight we cannot be seen at all. The light of the sun is coarse and crude, and it puts out the light of the spirits." Does it seem strange to you that at this moment I can feel the warmth of that wood fire by which you sit? There is a magic in burning wood. The combustion of coal has quite a different effect upon the psychic atmosphere. If one who had always been blind to visions and insensible to the finer feelings and premonitions of the invisible world would try meditating before a blazing wood fire for an hour or two every day or night, his eyes and other subtler senses might be open to things of which he had therefore never even dreamed of. Those Orientals who worship their god with fire are wise and full of visions. The light of burning wax has also a magical effect, though different from that of a wood fire. Sit sometimes in the evening with no light but that of a solitary candle, and see what visions will come from the void. I have not told you anything for a long time about the boy Lionel. He is now much interested in the idea of choosing a family of engineers in which to be born again. The thought is one to which he is always returning. "Why are you in such a hurry to leave me?" I asked him the first time he mentioned the subject. "But I do not feel as if I should be leaving you altogether," he replied. "I could come out to you in dreams." "Not at first," I told him. "You'd be prisoned and blind and deaf for a long time, and you might not be able to come out to me here until after I had also gone back again to the earth." "Then why not come along with me?" he asked. "Say, Father, why shouldn't we be born as twins?" The idea was so absurd that I laughed heartily, but Lionel could not see where the joke came in. "There are such things as twins," he said seriously. "I knew a pair of twin brothers when I lived in Boston. But when I return to earth, It is no part of my plan to be anybody's twin, so I tell Lionel that if he wants to enjoy my society for a time, he will have to stay quietly where he is. "But why can't we go back together?" he still asks, "and be cousins or neighbors at least?" "Perhaps we can," I tell him, "if you do not spoil everything by an unseemly haste." It is strange about this boy. Out in this world there is boundless opportunity to work in subtle matter, opportunity to invent and to experiment, yet he wants to get his hands on iron and steel. Very strange. Some night I will try to bring the boy to pay you a visit, so that you can see him. I mean, just before you fall asleep. Those are the true visions. The ones which come in sleep are apt to be confused by the jarring of the matter through which you pass in waking. Do not forget the boy. I've already told him how I come and write with your hand, and he is much interested. "Why couldn't I operate a telegraph in that way?" he asked me. But I advised him not to try it. He might interrupt some terrestrial message which had been sent and paid for. Occasionally I take him with me up to the pattern world. He has a little model of his own there, with which he amuses himself while I am examining other things. It is the model of a wheel, and he sets it going by the electricity of his fingers. No, it's not made of steel, not as you know steel. Why, what you call steel is too heavy. It would fall through this world so fast that it would not even leave a rent behind it. You must understand that the two worlds are composed of matter not only moving at a different rate of vibration, but charged with a different magnetism. It is said that two solid objects cannot occupy the same space at the same time, but that law does not apply to two objects, one of them belonging to your world and the other to ours. As water can be hot and wet at the same time, so a square foot of space can contain a square foot of earthly matter and a square foot of etheric matter. No, do not quibble about terms. You have no terms for the kind of matter that we use here, because you do not know anything about it. Lionel and his electric wheel would both be invisible to you if they were set down on the hearthrug before you at this very moment. Even the magic of that wood fire would not make them visible, at least not in the daylight. Some evening, but we'll speak of that at another time. I must go now. Letter 26. Circles in the Sand. I am just beginning to enjoy the romance of life out here. I must always have had the romantic temperament, but only since changing my place have I had time and opportunity to give rein to it. On earth there was always too much to be done, too many duties, too many demands on me. Here I am free. You have no idea of the meaning of freedom unless you can remember when you were out here last, and I doubt if you can remember that yet. When I say romance, I mean the charm of existence, the magic touch which turns the gray face of life to rose color. You know what I mean. It is wonderful to have leisure to dream and to realize one's dream, for here the realization goes with the dream. Everything is so real, imagination is so potent, and the power to link things is so great, so almost unlimited. The dreamers here are really not idle, for our dreaming is a kind of building, and even if it were not, we have a right to do about as we please. We have earned our vacation. The labor will come again. We shall reclothe ourselves in gross matter and take on its burdens. Why, it takes more energy on earth to put one heavy foot before another heavy foot, and to propel the 100 or 200 pound body a mile, than it takes here to go around the world. That will give you an idea of the quantity of surplus energy that we have for enjoying ourselves and for dream building. Perhaps on earth you work too much, more than is really necessary. The mass of needless things that you accumulate round you, the artificial wants that you create, the breakneck pace of your lives to provide all these things, seem to us absurd and rather pitiful. Your political economy is mere child's play. Your governments are cumbrous machines for doing the unnecessary. Most of your work is useless, and your lives would be nearly futile if you did not suffer so much that your souls learn, though unwillingly, that most of their strivings are in vain. How I used to swear and groan in the early days to make my little circle in the sand. And now I see that if I had taken more time to think, I might have recovered something of my past knowledge, gained in other lives, and though I still had felt obliged to draw my circle in the sand, I might have done it with less difficulty and in half the time. Here, if I choose, I can spend hours in watching the changing colors of a cloud, or better still, I can lie on my back and remember. It is wonderful to remember, to let the mind go back year after year, life after life, century after century, back and back, till one finds oneself a turtle. But one can also look ahead, forward and forward, life after life, century after century, one after one, till one finds oneself an archangel. The looking back is memory. The looking forward is creation. Of course, we create our own future. Who else could do it? We are influenced and moved and shifted and helped or retarded by others, but it is we ourselves who forge the chains every time. We tie knots that we shall have to untie, often with labor and perplexity. In going back over my past lives, I realize the why and the wherefore of my last one. It was, in a way, the least satisfactory of many lives, save one, but now I see its purpose, and that I laid the plans for it when I was last out here. I even arranged to go back to Earth at a definite time in order to be with certain friends who met me there. But I have turned the corner now and I've begun the upward march again. Already I'm laying the lines for my next coming, though there is no hurry. Bless you, I'm not going back until I've had my fill of the freedom and enjoyment of this existence here. Also, I have much studying to do. I want to review what I learned in those hitherto forgotten but now remembered lives. Do you recall how, when you went to school, you had occasionally to review the lessons of the preceding weeks or months? That custom is based on a sound principle. I am now having my review lessons. By and by, before I return to the world, I shall review these reviews, fixing, by will, the memories which I specially wish to carry over with me. It would be practically impossible to carry over intact the great panorama of experience which now unrolls itself before the eyes of my memory. But there are several fundamental things, philosophical principles and illustrations which I must not forget. Also, I want to take with me the knowledge of certain formula and the habit of certain practices which you would probably call occult, by means of which, when I am mature again in my new body, I can call into memory this very pageant of experience which now rolls before me whenever I will it. No, I'm not going to tell you about your own past. You must and you can recover it for yourself. So can anyone who knows the difference between memory and imagination. Yes, the difference is subtle, but as real as the difference between yesterday and tomorrow. I do not want you to be in any hurry about coming out here to stay. Remain where you are just as long as possible. Much that we do on this side you can do almost as well while still in the body. Of course you have to use more energy, but that is what energy is for, to use. Even when we store it for future use. Do not forget that. One reason why I rest much now and dream and amuse myself is because I want to store as much energy as possible to come back with power. It is well that you have taken my advice to idle a little and to get acquainted with your own soul. There are surprises in store for the person who will deliberately set out on the quest of his soul. The soul is not a will-o'-the-wisp, it is a beacon light to steer by and avoid the rocks of materialism and forgetfulness. I have had much joy in going back over my Greek incarnations. What concentration they had, those Greeks! They knew much. The waters of Lethe, for instance, what a conception! Brought from this side by masterly memory. If man would even try to remember, if he would only take time to consider all that he has been, there would be more hope of what he may become. Why, do you know that man may become a god, or that which, compared with ordinary humanity, has all the magnitude and grandeur of a god? Ye are gods was not said in a merely figurative sense. I have met the Master from Galilee and have held communion with him. There was a man and a God. The world has need of him now. Letter 27. The Magic Ring. It would be hard for you to understand, merely by my telling you, the difference between your life and ours. Begin with the difference in substance, not only the substance of our bodies, but the substance of natural objects which surround us. Do you start at the term natural objects as applied to the things of this world? You did not fancy, did you, that we had escaped nature? No one escapes nature, not even God. Nature is. Imagine that you had spent 60 or 70 years in a heavy, earthly body, a body which insisted on growing fat, and would get stiff-jointed and rheumatic, even going on strike occasionally to the extent of laying you up in bed for repairs of a more or less clumsy sort. Then fancy yourself suddenly exchanging this heavy body for a light and elastic form. Can you imagine it? I confess that it would have been difficult for me even a year or two ago. Clothed in this form, which is sufficiently radiant to light its own place when its light is not put out by the cruder light of the sun, fancy yourself moving from place to place, from person to person, from idea to idea. As time goes on, even the habit of demanding nourishment gradually wears off. We are no longer bothered by hunger or thirst, though I, for instance, still stay myself occasionally with a little nourishment, an infinitesimal amount compared with the beefsteak dinners which I used to eat. And we are no longer harassed by the 1,001 petty duties of the earth. Out here we have more confidence in moods. Engagements are seldom made, that is, binding engagements. As a rule, though there are exceptions here, desire is mutual. I want to see and commune with a friend at the same time when he feels a desire for my society, and we naturally drift together. The companionships here are very beautiful, but the solitudes are also full of charm. Since the first 2 or 3 months, I have not been lonesome. At first I felt like a fish out of water, of course. Nearly everyone does, though there are exceptions in the case of very spiritual people who have no earthly ties or ambitions. I had so fought the idea of dying that my new state seemed, at first, to be the proof of my failure, and I used to wander about under the impression that I was going to waste much valuable time which could have been used to better advantage in the storm and stress of earthly living. Of course, the teacher came to me, but he was too wise to carry me on his back even from the first. He reminded me of a few principles which he left me to apply, and gradually, as I got hold of the applications, I got hold of myself. Then, also, gradually, the beauty and the wonder of the new condition began to dawn on me, and I saw that instead of wasting time I was really gaining tremendous experience which could be utilized later. I have talked with many people here, people of all stages of intellectual and moral growth, and I am so sorry to say that the person who has a clear idea of the significance of life and its possibilities for development is about as rare here as on the earth. As I've said before, a man does not suddenly become all wise by changing the texture of his body. The vain man of earth is likely to be vain here, though in his next life the very law of reaction, if he has overdone vanity, may send him back as a modest or even bashful person, for a while at least, until the reaction has spent itself. In coming out, a man brings his character and characteristics with him. I've often been sorry for men who in life had been slaves of the business routine. Many of them cannot get away from it for a long time, and instead of enjoying themselves here, they go back and forth to and from the scenes of their old labors, working over and over some problem in tactics or finance until they're almost as weary as when they died. As you know, there are teachers here. Few of them are of the stature of my own teacher, but there are many who make it their pleasure to help the souls of the newly arrived. They never leave a newcomer entirely to his own resources. Help is always offered, though it's not always accepted. In that case, it will be offered again and again, for those who give themselves to others do so without hope of reward or even acknowledgment. If I had to set out to write a scientific treatise on the life on this side, I should have begun in quite a different way from this. In the first place, I should have postponed the labor about 10 years until all my facts were pigeon-holed and docketed. Then I should have begun at the beginning and dictated a book so dull that you'd have fallen asleep over it, and I should have had to nudge you from time to time to pick up the pencil fallen from your somnolent hand. Instead, I began to write soon after coming out, and these letters are really the letters of a traveler in a strange country. They record his impressions, often his mistakes, sometimes perhaps his provincial prejudices, but at least they are not a rehash of what somebody else has said. I like your keeping my photograph on your mantel as you do. It helps me to come. There is a great power in a photograph. I have been drawing pictures for you lately on the canvas of dreams to show you the futility and the vanity of certain things. Did you not know that we could do that? The power of the so-called dead to influence the living is immense, provided that the tie of sympathy has been made. I have taught you how to protect yourself against influences which you do not want. So do not be afraid. I will always stand guard to the extent of warning you if there is any danger of attack from this side. Already I have drawn a magic ring around you, which only the most advanced and powerful spirits could pass, even if they desired. That is, the teachers and I drew it together. You are doing our work just now and have a right to our protection. That the laborer is worthy of his hire is an axiom of both worlds. Only you, yourself, could now let down the bars for the inrush of evil and irresponsible spiritual intelligences, and if you should inadvertently let down the bars, we should rush to put them up again. We have some authority out here. Yes, even so soon I can say that. Are you surprised? Letter 28. Except ye be as little children. Once heard a man refer to this world as the play world, for, said he, we're all children here, and we create the environment that we desire. As a child at play can turn a chair into a tower or a prancing steed, so we, in this world, can make real, for the moment, whatever we imagine. Has it never filled you with amazement, that absolute vividness of the imagination of children? A child says unblushingly and with conviction, "That rug is a garden. That plank in the floor is a river. That chair is a castle, and I am a king." Why does he say these things? How can he say these things? Because, and here's the point, he still subconsciously remembers the life out here which he so lately left. He has carried over with him into the life of earth something of his lost freedom and power of imagination. That does not mean that all things in this world are imaginary. Far from it. Objects here, objects existing in tenuous matter, are as real and comparatively substantial as with you. But there is the possibility of creation here. Creation in the form of matter even more subtle still. Thought substance. If you create something on earth in solid matter, you create it first in thought substance. But there is this difference between your creation and ours. Until you have molded solid matter around your thought pattern, you do not believe that the thought pattern really exists, except in your own fancy. We out here can see the thought creations of others if we and they will it so. We can also, and I tell you this for your comfort, we can also see your thought creations, and by adding the strength of our will to yours, we can help you to realize them in substantial form. Sometimes we build here, bit by bit, in the four-dimensional world, especially when we wish to leave a thing for others to see and enjoy. When we wish a thing to survive for a long time. But a thought form is visible to all highly developed spirits. Of course, you understand that not all spirits are highly developed. In fact, very few are far progressed. But the dullest man out here has something which most of you have lost, the faith in his own thought creations. Now, the power which makes creation possible is not lost to a soul when it takes on solid matter again, but the power is gradually overcome, and the imagination is discouraged by the incredulity of mature men and women who say constantly to the child, "That's only play, That's not really so. That's only your imagination. If you print these letters, I wish you would insert here fragments from that wonderful poem of Wordsworth, Intimations of Immortality from Recollections of Early Childhood. The poem is as follows. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, hath had elsewhere its setting, and cometh from afar. Not in entire forgetfulness, and not in utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. Heaven lies about us in our infancy. Shades of the prison house begin to close upon the growing boy, but he beholds the light, and whence it flows. He sees it in his joy. The youth who daily farther from the east must travel, still is nature's priest, and by the vision splendid is on his way attended. At length the man perceives it die away, and fade into the light of common day. End of poem. There is almost no limit to the possibilities of the imagination, but to get the full power of it, one must trust one's imagination. If you say to yourself constantly, as a mother says to the child, "But this is only play, it's not real," you never can make the real things you have created in thought. The imagination itself is like a child and must be encouraged and believed in, or it cannot develop and do its perfect work. It is really fortunate for some of you that I am out here. I can do more for you here than there, because I have even greater faith in my imagination than I had before. The man who called this the play world has been trying all sorts of experiments with the power in himself. I have not had his permission to tell the stories that he tells me, but they would surprise you. For one thing, he helped his wife, after his so-called death, to carry out a joint plan of theirs which had seemed impossible to them before because of their lack of real faith. It was for the erection of a certain kind of house. But do not fancy that most people here are trying to build houses on earth. Far from it. Most of my fellow citizens are willing to work where they are and to let the earth alone. Of course, there are dreamers like me who are not satisfied with one world and who like to have their fingers in both, but they are rather rare, as poets are rare on earth. To most men, the world they happen to be in is sufficient for the time being. There is a certain fancy of mine, however, which it will amuse me to help realize on earth. You may not know that I'm doing it, but I shall know. I would not, for the world, as you say, disturb anybody by even the thought that I am fussing around in affairs which are now theirs. But if unseen and unfelt, I can help with the power of my self-confident imagination. There would be no harm done, and I shall have demonstrated something. Letter 29. An unexpected warning. I should be very sorry if the reading of these letters of mine should cause foolish and unthinking people to go spirit hunting, inviting into their human sphere the irresponsible and often lying elemental spirits. Tell them not to do it. My coming in this way, through your hand, is quite another matter. I could not do it if I had not been instructed in the scientific method of procedure. And I also could not do it if you should constantly interrupt me by side thoughts of your own, and by questions relevant or irrelevant. It is because you are perfectly passive and not even curious, letting me use your hand as on earth I would have used the hand of my stenographer, that I am able to write long and connected sentences. Most spirit communications, even when genuine, have little value, for the reason that they are nearly always colored by the mind of the person through whom they pass. You are right in reading nothing on the subject while these messages are coming, and in thinking nothing about this plane of life where I am. Thus you avoid preconceived ideas which would interrupt the flow of my ideas. You know, perhaps, that while on earth I investigated spiritualism as I investigated many things of an occult nature, looking always for the truth that was behind them. But I was convinced then, and I am now more than ever convinced, that except for the scientific demonstration that such things can be, which of course has value as a demonstration only, most spirit hunting is not only a waste of time, but an absolute detriment to those who engage in it. This may sound strange coming from a so-called spirit, one who is actually at this time in communication with the world. If that is so, I cannot help it. If I seem inconsistent, then I seem so, that's all. But I wish to go on record as discouraging irresponsible mediumship. If a person sitting for mediumship could be sure that at the other end of the psychic line there was an entity who had something sincere and important to say, and who really could use him or her to say it through, it would be another matter. But this world out here is full of vagrants, even as the earth. As this world is peopled largely from your world, it is inevitable that we have the same kind of beings that you have. They have not changed much in passing through the doors of death. Would you advise any delicate and sensitive woman to sit down in the center of Hyde Park and invite the passing crowds to come and speak through her, or touch her, or mingle their magnetism with hers? You shudder. You would shudder more had you seen some of the things which I've seen. Then, too, there is another class of beings here, the kind which we used to hear the theosophists call elementals. Now, there has been a lot of nonsense written about elementals, but take this for a fact. There are units of energy, units of consciousness, which correspond pretty closely to what the theosophists understand by elementals. These entities are not, as a rule, very highly developed, but as the stage of earth life is the stage to which they aspire, and as it is the next inevitable stage in their evolution, they are drawn to it powerfully. So, do not be too sure that the entity which raps on your table or your cupboard is the spirit of your deceased grandfather. It may be merely a blind and very desirous entity, an eager consciousness trying to use you to hasten its own evolution, trying to get into you or through you so as to enjoy the earth and the coarser vibrations of the earth. It may not be able to harm you, but on the other hand, it may do you a great deal of harm. You had better discourage such attempts to break through the veil which separates you from them. For the veil is thinner than you think, and though you cannot see through it, you can feel through it. Having said this, my duty in the matter is discharged, and the next time I come, I can tell you a story, maybe, instead of giving you a lecture. I really feel like an astral Scheherazade, but I fear you would tire of me before 1,001 nights were past. 1,001 nights! Before that time I shall have gone on. Now, I do not mean died again into another world beyond, but when I get through telling you what I desire you to know about my life here, I want to investigate other stars, if it shall be permitted. I'm like a young man who has lately inherited a fortune and has at last unlimited means and opportunity for travel. Though he might stay around home a few months, getting matters in shape and becoming adjusted to his new freedom of movement, yet the time would come when he would want to try his wings. I hope that's not a mixed metaphor. If so, you can edit me. I shall not feel hurt. End of part 5.